All right, everyone. Now, so we have someone very exciting as a speaker. Are we gonna please just either take our seats? Thank you very much. Wonderful. So now I'm very happy to actually invite someone that I've met a week back, but he's someone with a lot of experience. Mr. Pranav Sharma, the founding partner at Woodstock Fund. Pranav is a seasoned professional with over 15 years of experience. He firmly believes that for enterprises to build successful and financially sustainable businesses, financial well-being, wellness rests at the core. He has advisory role in many projects, and he's benefited from being both educated and have worked with multicultural and multifunctional environments. He is a graduate of the Vishkavarma Institute of Technology in Pune University, where he studied mechanical engineering, as well as the Asian Institute of Management in the Philippines, and also at HEC in Paris. He did his MBA. So Pranav's professional expertise is instrumental in guiding him towards his current role with being the founder of Woodstock Fund. Thank you very much, and let's give a round of applause.
So hi everyone, such a pleasure to be here, and just wanted to acknowledge Richa, and she's not here right now, but just sharing that when she brought about that there's a conference she's going to be organizing, I was pleasantly surprised that this is going to be just another conference, but then this 10-minute conversation will end up becoming, let's say, a 45-minute conversation. I realized that she's onto something which is really powerful. And seeing regulators, seeing great presentation being made by Thomas and then subsequently creators and getting all of them into a single forum has been a very pleasant surprise, but extremely powerful, and this is what I would say great intentions can bring about. And a topic which was given to me, and this is something that I did not call for because my intention here was that let's power it by Woodstock and let's see that how authentic content and authentic people can come over here and we can have interaction possibly. So one of the things which I'm not doing here is sharing a presentation so that we can make it a lot more engaging. I'll be sharing some frames, some very simple frameworks in terms of sharing perspective as to what I would say what VC investing in Web3 is all about. And let's see if we can do a lot more Q&A so that we can make this a lot more engaging. So as the topic goes, what is the role of VCs in the growing Web3 ecosystem? So definitely the ecosystem is growing, as you must have experienced. So I think the word really counts. Few years back, the growth word was missing. This is when I started, getting involved into this space. This was 2016 is when I, sort of discovered Bitcoin, and I found this to be a very different paradigm. I saw that this was completely different from fintech. I was investing with a few people from some of the top, private equity firms in India, KKR, Chris Capital, some friends, from there, and realized that, both fintech as well as enterprise SaaS investing was a red ocean strategy. And when I looked at Bitcoin, I saw that this is going to be a participative economy, which is going to flourish and scale over a span of time. That's how I got deeply involved into this. So 15 years about in financial services and coming into this space, I was looking at this from the lens of an ever expanding horizon. And now as I look back and I sort of look forward, I see that this has become a consumer play with a lot of action happening in NFT, metaverse, etc., etc. And so one thing which I immediately comes to me when I look at this as a question here, which is here, is that what is the role of a VC in Web3? And I think just two words come to my mind: responsible investing. And I think these two words, will make a lot of sense to you because you must have all experienced that what's been happening in this space over the past, let's say about a month or so. What happened with Terra Luna, what happened with, let's say, 3AC, what happened with, let's say, BlockFi, etc., etc. A lot of people are labeling this as a contagion, and this contagion is happening because of a lot of these things were interconnected as systems, and a lot of investments were made into systems which are without understanding the underlying. I hope this also reminds you of 2008 crisis that happened, which shook up the system, but also created the unicorns, or let's say decacorns of today. Facebook, Apple, Google, all of them emerged practically stronger out of that particular bloodbath that happened. Same thing we'll experience in Web 3.0 as well. And just want to further say that, here when you talk about responsible investing, it becomes sort of an equation in many ways. It's not so easy. It may look very fancy when somebody sees that, hey, you are the largest and the oldest VC fund that emerged out of India, and then you have then a fund in US, and then you also have presence in Dubai, etc., and you're focused on East to West corridor. This must be an extremely romantic journey. What I think just want to share here is that, if you want to responsibly invest, and let's say, then in that context, it's a complex equation of X into Y into Z equals to inverted, I would say, brackets. Let me say, let me share what is X here. So X is the macro. Now, macro headwinds, as you must be understanding, is largely what Fed is doing, and there are different ways of looking at it. Definitely 75 basis points, shook up the markets and made a lot of people wonder what's going to happen next. The jury's out, and a lot of people say that it's going to be 100 basis points, probably another 100 basis points, but definitely September elections are around the corner, right? So that's your macro. Macro is also complex geopolitical situation happening, wherein let's say something's happening, let's say Ukraine, Russia is happening, there's a lot of stuff happening in terms of, I'm just saying that strange alliances are getting formed, US, Venezuela, etc. I just don't want to go detail into something which could be a topic of very detailed conversation here. But macro is something which is very, very important for any VC operating in, I would say, any space, Web3 in particular, to understand very deeply. This is your X. The Y here is Bitcoin. I mean, whether you like it or not, but Bitcoin is the most important asset in itself, and it defines the asset class. So what happens to Bitcoin? It happens to the entire space. So when you look at Bitcoin, Bitcoin is also about mining. So let's say the cost of mining, the amount of hash rate from where it comes from, and essentially how that sort of correlates with the entire space in many ways. So when Bitcoin goes down, Ethereum goes down, a bunch of other things go down, what does it mean? At some point, probably Bitcoin will become uncorrelated with Ethereum. At some point, Bitcoin will become uncorrelated with the broader markets. So that's your X, that is your Y. And the Z is your micro. Micro is, as in, let's say, if you are investing into a specific protocol, let's say the decentralized social media protocol, what's happening in the underlying? What is the traction there? What's happening in terms of, is it really the right problem being solved at the right time, at the right place? And so X into Y into Z in many ways defines that, are you investing in something right, which is going to create tremendous value, or is it going to be something where you're going to experience a lot more challenge in terms of discovering value? So now let's look at, let's say, X, Y, Z. So I'll just probably just ask the audience here is that when you look at X, which is macro, is it positive or negative? Negative? It is negative. Then when you look at Y, which is the Bitcoin in terms of what is happening from the price perspective, do you look at this as positive or negative right now? Positive, buying opportunity, but technically it's negative for the people who bought at, let's say, $60,000, right? 69, right? So that means two negatives here. And the third one is, let's say, even you have invested into the best project, let's say, I'm just saying hypothetically, let's say Polygon, for example. A lot of people may be knowing about Polygon here. Then let's say one of the factors, micro, is positive. But the thing is, two negatives do not make it positive here. So it is once again negative. So it is X into Y into Z, it is still negative. So the point here is that extremely complex to invest into this space. And just sort of highlighting that this is one framework to look at when you're looking at potentially investing into this asset class. It is X into Y into Z. So this is one. The second point I want to make here is the second frame is that blockchain trilemma, everyone knows about it here. So the blockchain trilemma is all about scalability, decentralization, and essentially, blockchain trilemma sort of gives you certain constraints in which blockchain actually operates. There is also a VC trilemma in Web 3.0, if I may put it across. So the first one is that let's say any VC who exists in the market exists because of the investors. Investors give you money and you have a fiduciary responsibility to take care of their returns and take the journey forward there. Definitely you want patient investors, you want savvy investors to be operating with you. And that is how you'll end up investing into emerging technology systematically. The second part of the trilemma is your investee companies. A lot of these early stage protocols are very fragile. They're started by technologists, they're started by individuals who are still finding ways and means of building teams, collaborating cross-border, building partnership, API integrations, technology risk, etc., etc. There's so much of complexity which goes under the hood in terms of these investee companies. So there is a responsibility on the investee companies as well. In our fund, let's say we look at 5 T's. Definitely the team is very important. The second is that the technology is very important, which is built by the team. The timing is very important. The total addressable market is important. The traction is very important. So these 5 T's are very, very important for the investee company. And then the third thing is internal. I mean, ultimately, if you look at any fund, is also an organization. It is also operating with its own constraints and its own situations. For example, let's say as a fund, we are operating out of 3 separate locations. It has its own complexities it is managing. Now, if you look at this as a trilemma, if all the 3 things are panning out, now my question here is that if you look at just 2 things and sort of ignore the third one, is it the right way to manage a fund? Or let's say manage, I'm just saying manage as a VC to be responsibly investing into the ecosystem? In my opinion, no. And the reason is, and the complexity here is that you have to find a way to be at the center of all the 3. You have to have investors, investee, and the internal. Internal also includes having lots of checks and balances in place, having risk management frameworks and risk management processes in place in a way that you are able to address this as an asset class over longer time frames. So this is the second frame I'll leave you behind with, which is the 3 I's. And then subsequently, then further refining the whole definition, is it just about responsible investing or is it about responsible investing in future? So when you're talking about responsible investing in future, then you're talking about sort of something which is going to still pan out. It's still very abstract, right? So when you're talking about responsible investing in future, it's also about the stakeholders who are going to eventually evolve into something more meaningful over a span of time. So understanding their context is very important. And I just want to highlight there are 4 stakeholders which make a lot of sense. There are many more, but just 4 stakeholders. I think the stakeholder number 1 is definitely, in the current context, I'll put it as regulators, for example. Now the thing is, understanding the existing regulatory frameworks is very important to appreciate. The second thing which it is very important is that can you participate proactively in terms of engaging with the regulators, talking to them, understanding their context, having conversation in which things are getting built, and sort of, building out frameworks in a way that you can be progressively engaging with the policy systematically. So this is one, regulator. The second which is very important is your builders. People who are building this future of tomorrow. People who are building decentralized network, people who are building decentralized finance, NFT applications, platform, etc., etc. So how you systematically so my personal view is that in Web3 what I learned is that if you can simply be available to help and contribute, that is good enough. If you can help accelerate, powerful. If you can help incubate, even more powerful. So this is something which is on the second stakeholder, which is your, let's say, builders. The third stakeholder, which is very important, is developers. Now, if data was the new oil a few years back, I think developers are the new oil for Web 3.0. So even, let's say, Middle East has also come with, let's say, this huge drive to have most talented developers globally coming in here. I think it's a very powerful and very important move. Because these are the people who are going to eventually define that what is this new wiring which will emerge in Web 3.0 and what kind of pathways will emerge in terms of transfer of value and data. So at least understanding developer context at a minimum level is very important. The second thing which is very important is can you aggregate these communities? Can you support them in hackathons? Can you give them problem statements? Can you incentivize them? So this is on the developer side. And I think the fourth one, which everyone sort of misses out here when we discuss about Web 3.0, is the holy grail of consumers. So if let's say the next billion users are not going to come on Web 3.0, we will continue to go into the loops and loops of speculation in this space. So, coming back to the whole question that, is the role of the VC in the growing Web3 ecosystem to support speculation, or is it about onboarding the next billion users? And I think it is all about, finding those passionate teams which are building the future and which are committed to onboard the next billion users into these frameworks. So, these are some of the frames I'll leave you behind with, just to, summarize, very briefly. First one is that look at this as an equation, X, Y, and Z equals to some sort of a bracket. When X is your macro, Y is your Bitcoin, and C is your micro. Second thing is, look at this as a trilemma. This is not only trilemma of blockchain, this is also a trilemma which, exists even for VC funds as well, in terms of, having your investors, where you have fiduciary responsibility, investees, where you definitely need to, pay a lot more attention, work very closely with them. And third is your internal, as in checks and balances, compliances, whether it's statutory, whether it is internal, et cetera, and risk management processes, et cetera, and so on and so forth. And I think so just, putting it all together, building an ecosystem is a very natural step to put it all, together as a VC fund in Web3 space. So yeah, it's all the aspects of Web 2.0 in terms of being extremely disciplined in terms of investing, having the right systems and processes in place for due diligences, but also the unique angle of building an ecosystem in Web3 perspective. So just want to thank, Bricha for this, amazing, you can say, conference. It sort of, gives a forum for amazing people to be engaging in terms of the content as well as the responsible way of building an ecosystem together. I definitely wish that we do this a lot more frequently so that we create this into a very powerful, you can say, ecosystem here in Dubai. Very open to questions here. Yes, please.
You've set up a couple of trilemmas there. There seems to be another trilemma is the early stage investors. I'm an angel, so I've put various bets since 2016 on these projects. What stage gets you talking about when you talk about those trilemmas and investors in the future?
I think it's a great question. So basically, just to rephrase and share with you, he's an angel investor. And he experiences, trilemma, and he's saying that what is the context in which you are sharing the trilemma? So my here answer would be this trilemma cuts across. So let's say from a fund perspective, we have an early stage fund, we have an early growth mid-market kind of fund, and we are also looking at growth stage investing as well. And we have realized that this trilemma exists in all the templates. The only thing that happens is that in this space, you are expected to be an operating partner, an active investor, very deeply involved. Whether you're an angel investor, whether you're a VC fund, any project would expect you to contribute, right? So definitely it becomes a situation in terms of how do you set expectations, how do you also contribute, how do you sort of scale up, because that also becomes your pathway to monetize, right? So just want to acknowledge that, this is something you have to embed in your existing design. Maybe in your case, it's about building a circle of people. Let's say if you are great at business development, you have somebody who's a technologist, get somebody who's great at marketing, branding, etc., and build a circle of influence. For example, just to solve for this problem, within our fund itself, we have a 24-member team. And we recently got a director of talent, who was heading HR at Roger International in Canada. And the reason of getting all of these people is that because you have to work closely with the teams. There is no other way. So as an angel, I understand your pain. I'm also angel in few, which as a fund we don't invest into, so I understand your pain. Yes, please.
Yeah, so in the Web3 ecosystem, is it in terms of VC's funding, have it moved from equity-based funding to a token-based funding?
That's a great question. So if you did not hear what he's saying, he's asking is that has the VC funding moved from token funding to equity funding? Equity funding to token funding. Equity funding to token funding, right? And my answer would be that it amazes me in terms of the kind of evolution that has happened on the contractual documentation side. It's amazing. So we have invested so far into 17 countries, and we like to go deep in terms of understanding the contracts, not only the transaction contracts, but also the underlying contracts, like employment contracts, like looking at, what are the licenses and, other things that they have. And the kind of transaction contracts that we see right now are very interesting. They're almost like structured products. So at times, let's say sometimes it is equity initially, and then subsequently spawns off into token and equity, or token or equity. Sometimes it is token, and then these projects realize that they also have a top line and a bottom line, and then they'll end up, issuing equity as well. So what is the high level point I'm making here? The high level point I'm making here is that if the network effects, then having a token play makes absolute sense. And my advice generally to all the startups here, in general here as well, is that unless you have a product market fit and reasonable traction, I just want to highlight the word reasonable. Reasonable means that there has to be statistically significant and sustainable traction. Then a network effect can potentially take off. That means your token will have utility. Because having a token without utility can be tantamount to security in that sense. So you were better off actually issuing equity at that particular point in time. So general advice at a very high level boilerplate that I give to people is that please go for equity, and till you have a product market fit and reasonable traction, then you decide whether you want to issue a token or whether you want to continue the path of having an equity. And if you'll end up having a top line and a bottom line as well, as in you have a revenue play, then equity will become valuable over a span of time. Just as a case in point, let's say Binance. Binance token is valuable, Binance equity is valuable. The business is making money as well as the token is making money. So that's a very unique case wherein both of them are extremely valuable, but extremely difficult to have a value in both equity as well as tokens. Yes, please.
You mentioned about two roles of VCs, so supporting the speculation and bringing the users. Speculation is kind of here. How about the users? How VCs can help in
A great question once again. So I think when, I would say in 2017, there was no concept of users, by the way, in this space. It was all about white papers. It was all about getting the technology right. And then there were hacks. 2018, 19 abouts, and the technology was still, finding its, way through in terms of, finding whether these rails are real or they're just, people tinkering around in their garage, etc. Right? And then in this wave, we have seen that I think the positive of, what happened in the recent collapse of the market, also the DeFi protocols stood their ground, right? And all the liquidations happened automatically, 24/7 on. So what does it mean is that technology is getting a lot more robust. That means the real consumer can participate. So we are at a point where it is not about marketing the token, it is about marketing the product, right? So now the product is standing tall. It is a real product which can be marketed well. So now I think the traditional branding concept, the traditional marketing concepts, of company, its positioning, and it's focusing on the target market and creating a consumer base through the traditional methods will gain ground. Think of this like fintech and enterprise SaaS in terms of customer acquisition. So if you're a B2B play, then it is enterprise SaaS. I'm just saying as an analogy. If you're, let's say, a B2C play, then think of this like DeFi, which is like fintech broadly. So how do you, let's say, I'm just saying, let's say if you're an application, let's say web application, or let's say a mobile application, then essentially how do you end up having 1 million users? So here I just, speak with people, and it does not augur well with many people, but I just say that the traditional funnel of fintech and enterprise SaaS will also be applied to Web 3.0 over a span of time, which is basically the inverted funnel of the number of users on the platform. Second is number of active users, and third is number of paid users. Any further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pranav. I just want to say some things. Thank you, Pranav, for taking the time out and being the powered by the partner or sponsor for MetaDecrypt's Web3 Summit. I want to share something to everybody that Pranav is a gentleman or a person who is value-driven, and his ethos are something that you all can relate to. One of the things that I really consider, probably I have not said this, but Pranav is one person that if I have any problem or any complex situation in business or in the whole blockchain and whatever is happening with the projects, etc. So he is the person who has a very clear way of thinking. So anybody who, you'll know about his, portfolio companies tomorrow, but then the way he thinks, the way he guides the projects to become sustainable, very well aligned to the integrity of both the worlds, which is Web 2 and Web 3. He understands the whole ecosystem. He told me that, we should bring different dimensions of thought processes. It's okay if it's, a controversial topic as well. But then I want to say one thing, that if his, the success of Woodstock is because of the way he thinks and chooses the projects that they invest in. And so far, I think, their strategy to choose projects, be it at the infrastructure level, which is the blockchain, and then multiple, infrastructure networks. There are multiple things that are there. And at the application level, what are the different kinds of projects that they invest in? I would say that, and if anybody wants to get the right guidance and is really building a very solid product, should definitely contact Pranav, because the way he thinks and the way he can guide you to kind of shape up your product to be aligned aligned that it has a long-term future and business value. So I think I'm going to be considering him for anything mentorship, or I mean, I consider that anybody who thinks that he wants a mentor, Pranav is, I think, the best person. So.
Just, final thought here is Richa is just too kind. So please discount by 50%. But please feel free to reach out. Thank you very much, Richa, for all these lovely words.
So.